Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm David Swan, instructional designer with the Faculty Success Center at Kalamazoo Velley Community College. In this video, I'm going to talk about alt text. I'm going to discuss what alt text is, and then the different types of images we would want to add alternative text to, such as decorative images, photo or illustrations, graphs, and charts. So to begin with, what is alt text? Well, the purpose of alt text or alternative text is to convey the why of an image as it relates to the content of a document or web page. Alt text is read aloud to users by screen reader software, allowing blind and visually impaired users to access the information conveyed by the image. Alt text also displays on the page if the image fails to load, ensuring that users still have access to the information conveyed by the image. So we are going to dive into adding alt text to images in Canvas, specifically the rich content editor in Canvas. And we're going to do this by looking at the three different categories of images we would want to add text to. So the first one is decorative. The second one is images and or illustrations. And the third is charts and graphs. So let's zero in on decorative. So a decorative image is an image that is not essential to understanding the content and purpose of the content of a page. You can either mark the image as decorative or you can describe it. So you have a choice. So here I have a photograph. The image is a photograph of the skyline of Tokyo, Japan. In the background, you see Mount Fuji, and I'm simply going to use this as a way to set a tone on my page. Maybe it's a page about cities or metropolises. Maybe it's a page that's talking about Tokyo itself. Maybe it's a page about urban architecture. And we're using this as like a photo at the top of the page. It's just there to be visually attractive. And so we have some choices that we need to make as an instructor. So I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to go into the edit mode and scroll back down to our decorative image, and we'll discuss some of the features and details about adding alternative text to an image and how a screen reader interacts with that. So I'm going to click on the image, and when you click on an image that you have inserted into the Canvas content editor, it raises up this option to click on image option. I'm going to click on that. And here is where you can set certain things. You can set the size. You can embed the image. By default, that's what it does. But we're interested in the alt text. And one thing you should know right from the start is that anytime you insert an image into a Canvas page or anywhere where the Canvas rich content editor exists, it's going to by default use the file name of the image file as the alt text, and you do not want to leave it that way, because what will happen is a student using a screen reader, and let me just be very clear, a screen reader is an application, a piece of software used by a student with blindness or very low vision to read the page and the content to them. Now, obviously, it reads the text, but when it encounters an image, it's going to identify that image as an image, and it's going to read any alternative text that is attached to that photo. Now, that's not something that the sighted students would see. It's for the screen reader to read to the student using the screen reader. And in this case, if we left it as is with the file name, it would simply read Tokyo skyline, period, WEBP, and that's it. It provides no information, no useful information to the student. So you have a couple choices in this case. You can, number one, simply click on decorative image, and it will identify it as a decorative image to the student using the screen reader, and that information is going to tell them, well, there's a photo here or an image here, but it has nothing significantly to do with understanding the content of the page, and so I'm going to move on. But the other choice you could make is, let's say, even though this is a decorative image, it relates to the content of the page. You might at least write, and this is where we can turn this off, skyline of Tokyo, Japan, with Mount Fuji in the background. Now you're providing just a description of the photo, and this would be a way to be a bit more inclusive with a student using a screen reader. They're aware that there is a decorative image there, but instead of just merely marking it decorative, you are providing them a little bit of information about the image. There are other images that you might use as design elements in a page if you choose to do so, that really, it could be like a horizontal line or a picture of a flower or a mountain that really has nothing to do at all with the content of the page, and therefore you might want to mark it as decorative. And you'll notice when I click on decorative, that's all it's going to tell the screen reader. Nothing in the alt text field will be read. So that is how we write alternative text for a decorative image. Let's move on to probably, arguably, well, depending on your content, the more common types of images, and that is either a photograph or a photograph of an illustration or of a map or something to that effect. And in this case, we want to think in terms of context. So context is probably the most important thing to consider when we include an image in a Canvas page, for example, where there's content and you have an image that's directly related and relevant to students understanding the content that you're presenting them. And so here I have this image. It's a frame capture or a screen capture, though they didn't use that term at that time, from the original Godzilla movie that was filmed and released in 1954. And of course, it would depend on the discipline and the purpose of the photo. So let's say, for example, this is on a course, and I'm just going to invent a course on global history, and there's a focus here on the Cold War globally, but now we're going to look at Japan, and we're looking at how the atomic bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima impacted Japanese society. And so we're doing this historical analysis, and one of the things that we talk about is Godzilla and how it's an allegory to the atomic bomb droppings on Japan. And so that's the context, and that's the purpose of including this photo in the content of this imaginary page that I've just created in my mind. So I'm going to click on here, and again, I'm going to click on image options, and I am going to replace the file name with a brief description that relates to the purpose of the photo and how it relates to the content. So here I write a frame shot of Godzilla from the original movie shot in 1954. Godzilla served as an allegory of the devastation of the dropping of the atomic bombs. Now, a couple guidelines here about the length, how much text should you write, and there's a couple ways we can think about this. Canvas will mark this as too long if it goes beyond 120 characters. That's an arbitrary number. There are other ways we can approach this. I try to keep it to no more than 2 sentences or 1 long sentence. Another way to think about it is want to keep it the length of a tweet if you're a person who uses Twitter. But I prefer to think in terms of trying to keep it to 1 to 2 sentences. I think this one here is in particular 149 characters, and that's fine. It doesn't have to strictly be 120 characters. And what you'll notice is that it will be marked as too long in the Canvas accessibility checker, and you can simply override that and ignore that if you go a little over 120 characters. It's no big deal. The more important thing is what we've done is we've provided the student with a description that, hey, this is a shot of Godzilla from the original movie, and here is why it's relevant to this content, because the Godzilla movie was this allegory of the devastation of the atomic bombing of Japan. So that's one way we could think of it. Just to kind of emphasize the importance of context, let's change our context from a history class to, let's say, an illustration class, an art class, where students are learning how to draw, and Godzilla is being used as a thing to draw in this particular class. And so now we're going to change the description to match an assignment where students are going to be asked to create an illustration of Godzilla. And so here's what I'm going to write. In selecting an image of Godzilla for reference, select an arresting and dramatic image, such as this one from the original movie in 1954 with Godzilla facing tanks and cannons. So now the context of the purpose of the photo has changed completely, because it's all about, number one, what type of image of Godzilla are you going to select? Choose one that's dramatic. There's all these tanks and guns pointed right at Godzilla. And so in this case, what I've done is I'm describing what the image is. I'm also describing the purpose of the image. So those are some of the considerations that you want to keep in mind when you write alternative text for any type of image. Don't forget to click on Done when you've added your alternative text in the alternative text control panel. Let's scroll down to our last category of images, and that would be charts and graphs. When you add a chart or graph and it's an image, you want to use alt text to provide the information conveyed in the object. And you want to try to convey the insight that the chart is providing. And the alt text should also clearly describe the beginning point, progress, and conclusion of the chart or the graph. So here we have a population chart and graph, and it's of Kalamazoo population by year starting in 1990 going to 2021. And in this class we're probably talking about a course that we study population and population growth. It might be an economics class where part of it is studying population trends and what causes populations to decline or to increase. Either way, for the student using a screen reader, we want to make sure that they understand the essential information that this chart is sharing. And part of that is context, right? How is this relevant to the content and the goals of the content of this page? So as usual, I'm going to click on the image. I'm going to go to image options, and I'm going to replace the file name with a description that's relevant and also addresses the beginning point, the end point, and the progress of the numbers that we're seeing here. So what I write is, the population of Kalamazoo, Michigan has been on the decline as seen in this chart, which shows a steady population decline with a population of 80,290 in 1990, dropping to 73,257 in 2021. And again, this particular alt text definitely exceeds 120 characters, but not by that much. It's one long sentence, but it conveys the essential information that the chart is sharing. The whole point is we're looking at a city that has experienced a population decline between 1990 and 2021. The point is that this is relevant to the context of the content that the student is studying, and also it's a nice synopsis of the chart. So, in conclusion, alternative text is simply a way to provide contextual description of an image that you insert into a Canvas page or any other type of app for that matter, but we're focused on Canvas here. And for decorative images, we can mark it as decorative, or we can provide a simple description of the image. For all other images and illustrations and so forth, photographs, it really comes down to context, and the context and the purpose of the image that it serves within the page. And then finally, with charts and graphs, we're making sure the students understand the essential conclusion of the numbers that are being presented or the data that's being presented. So we're providing a synopsis of the data and the trend perhaps that the data is presenting in the chart. A couple other things to keep in mind about writing alternative text: go by some type of standard of keeping it as short as you can reasonably do. So it could be 120 characters, or it could be 2 sentences or 1 long sentence, but we certainly want to keep it as concise as possible. And by doing all these things, you're going to provide all of your students, and in particular your students with blindness and low vision who use screen readers, and accessibility and access to all the images that you use in your Canvas online course.